In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
Oh, geez. I'm never here before, Michael, and I don't really know what to do with myself. I'm kind of weird sitting here alone, waiting for him to come through. I gotta be late more often. This is not working for me.
I just gotta catch my breath.
Oh,
oh my gosh, it was so wild. I was just offered a new job by an aerospace company in one of the Carolinas, and I recently discovered that I actually have money in an African bank. So I had to deal with all of that.
Where's that hush money?
Well, yeah. It was, and I also got an email that said, have you started a hush money account? And I was like, oh my gosh, I was just talking to Jack about this. And then they were like, well, how much money should you have in your hush money account? And, oh man. Did you know, I'm so glad to see you, by the way, Jack.
I know, me too. I was like freaking out. I mean, you know me in this place, sitting here alone, it's weird for me. So thank God you're here.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here now. Well, I was thinking the other day I saw an article that said cyber criminals have stolen an estimated $44 million in 2021 through phishing scams. And I guess apparently the average, so the total amount was $44 million. The average lost per account or per attack is only $136. So a lot of it is very little, hey, give us your credit card number or whatever, like very small stuff. But at $44 million. And apparently the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, they show that consumers reported losing nearly $8 billion in scams in 2022. So I don't know where the first stat came from, but $8 billion in scams. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's funny. I just bought a new car, and so I owe a little bit of money on the one that I already had, and I'm selling it. And right away, I had to deal with the scammers. And I haven't sold a car, mind you, a private sale of a vehicle in probably 20 years. It's been pushing that long, I would say, at least. And so the first couple of bites that I got, there were obvious ones because my girlfriend listed it on Facebook, some kind of Facebook thing that I wasn't aware of. And then I listed it on Craigslist.
Marketplace, yeah.
Yeah. So there were the obvious ones that came in from like Libya or something. And it's just like, so when are you going to fly in from Tripoli to see the vehicle there? I mean,
Mind you, it has over 200,000 miles on it. So
yeah,
once
and you're going to have to, by the way, shipping out of Baltimore is not possible right now either. So I don't know where you're going to drive it to on the East Coast to get it back to Libya. But, so there were the obvious ones that came through like, hey, really interested in your car, but I'm halfway around the world living in, like I said, Tashkent or something like that.
Do you mind accepting this wire transfer?
Yeah, exactly. Go to Eastern Union. I'm like, where's that? Like, I've heard of Western Union, but Eastern Union? I can't go there. So the thing about the scams, though, for the cars, I read about them because apparently there are some VIN number scams, and it's a really easy scam, and it's not for very much money either. All they bilk you out of is like anywhere between $20 and $50, $60. And what they try to do is they try to get you to go to some website that isn't legit, and they promise you a VIN report. They promise you like a Carfax type thing. But they never deliver on it. So you're supposed to get this cut rate thing to show the potential buyer, like, look, it's never had any accidents, it's got a clean title, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole thing's a scam. But it takes forever for you to realize that it is, because they present themselves as reasonably legitimate. There's some red flags that went up for me here and there about the fourth or fifth text, because to me it's reasonable when you're communicating by a text to sell a car, like, well, you know, how many highway miles does it have, or what color's the interior, or has it been tuned up ever, or when was the last time it had the brakes? I mean, you know, stuff like that. But they march through it, and most scams, it's simple. I mean, I get them in the email, they call on the phone. I know immediately, gone. I'm not. This is a joke. This is a larf. This is not real. This is Fugazi. These people, it takes forever. It takes like, they'll hook you, and then 15 minutes later, it's, well, please go to, one of them was like seahawkvin.com. And I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing. Honestly, like, who in the hell do you think I am? Seahawksvin.com? It sounds like some transplant from New York that like is a big Seahawks fan or something living in Seattle. Like, hey, how you doing? I'm Seahawks Vin. You know, I gave up on the freaking Giants, and now I'm over here, you're rooting for the Seahawks, you know, and this kind of thing.
You get a discount.
I look up Vin for you for nothing. Like,
you get a discount on the season tickets.
No. This not happening. But it takes like 15 minutes for you to realize, oh God, it's a VIN scam. So I hate that part about selling my car, is that you don't really know until, you know, down the line that, oh, they're trying to scam me. So, and the one guy was persistent. Oh, I finally had to block his number because, I mean, he was generally, you could tell based on his text messages that came in at like 3 a.m, by the way, he was genuinely irritated that I was not falling for the scam. He kept sending me these irate messages like, I don't think this is very much to ask for if I'm going to spend $5,000 on a car for you to provide me with a, please go here now and click the link. I'm just
my gosh.
No, sorry.
Here's a tiny URL so that you can put in your credit card information.
Just a sliver too high of an IQ on this end to fall for that one. Sorry, my friend, not happening. Best of luck with your scamming.
Well, I really don't like it. I was signing up for, I think there was a website that I use for tracking my budget and everything. And they recently closed down the service that I was using, and it was bought out by another company. So the other company was like, okay, you got to go through and enroll for this. Well, it got to a point where the service that I was enrolling for really just wanted to sell me more credit cards. They just wanted to give me more credit cards. And I was like, okay, I don't like this. But it took me like 10 clicks after giving them the information. And every time you click to go to the next page, they've got now a partial picture of your profile. And so then they're going to just bomb you with all of these emails. And this was a legitimate company, but they were just trying to give me credit cards.
Yeah, it's just, the world has just changed, and not for the better in so many ways. I mean, again, for as misanthropic as I can be, I still like to believe that in the heart of every person, you know, beats a venerable pulse, I suppose. But it's so difficult. I mean, I was like half road rage today just coming home by this child. I mean, this little boy who was driving in front of me. It was almost sad. It was like he couldn't have been more than 20. And he was driving like a moron. And I didn't even make a gesture at him at all. You know, I mean, I try not to do that. I think I just literally said to myself something like, oh, come on, what the hell, dude, or something. And the next thing you know, he's pulling up in front of me at the light, hanging out the window, giving me the whole, hey, what the fuck, you know, that sort of stuff. And I was just looking at him, I was just like, drive your car, little boy. Just drive your car. Spend more time driving the car and learning how to operate the motor vehicle correctly in traffic, then you're worrying about everybody else running their mouth or doing whatever they're doing in traffic.
Yeah.
You're far too involved in what other people are doing. If you just drive your car, little man, this wouldn't be happening, because I didn't even really do anything. But I almost think like he was baiting people just so he could do that. And, you know, it's on a somewhat related note. It's more serious, but there was a shooting that happened out not too far away from where we live late last week. or actually, I think it happened the week before last, but now they've released body camera video about it. And, I work in news radio, God help me in some ways for that, but I, have to make a living. That's what I've done for a long time. So I've wound up there. And I wound up writing a story, and a news director wanted me to write a story about the dramatic body camera video. And it is something, because the dude just comes out. The officers are being super polite with him and very reasonable, and they realize he has weapons, so they back off and take up a position behind a squad car or some, RAV4 in the parking lot or something. And then the guy comes out, guns blazing, plural. He has one in each hand. And it's just, the thing about it that's so unnerving is that it's so sort of nonchalant, because he comes out and fires the guns, and then the officer actually says, "Are you hit?" to the guy who was shooting at them. And he said, "Yeah." He says, "Where are you hit?" He says, "In the hand." And It's like they were playing with BB guns or something that would put an eye out at best. I mean,
scary.
And I told my news director today, I said, and when you do it for audio, for like a radio story like I did, it's very dramatic because it's theater of the mind. So you're not seeing the pictures, but you can hear the gunshots and everything. And I told him today, I said, I hope I never have to do another one of these stories again, because I'm worried that we're glorifying it. I'm worried that we're making this shootout at the Motel 6 where Tom Bodette's going to leave the light on for you and the 9mm on the friggin', credenza, so you can pick it up and shoot it at the cop when he comes to bang on the door because there's a domestic disturbance going on. I'm worried that we're glorifying this in some ways, and it bothers me. He didn't get it, of course, but that's another story. They're going to bill you for that.
You said news and theater of the mind, so I couldn't help myself. No, you're so right. And my wife and I were recently in traffic, and there was somebody, they were doing something stupid, and she was going to just be like, "What are you doing?" Like engaging with them. And I just said, "Okay, here's the thing, though." And I had just seen it on a news article. Don't engage them.
No.
You can't engage them, because that's how people get shot. And the next, and the next thing is, they're pulling out a gun and they're going to show you who's better. And you know what? Honestly, the people who do those things aren't in their right mind. They really are not in their right mind. They're not playing with the same deck of cards that you and I are. And if they snap, and they're ready to go. And when they're in that mindset, it's all guns a-blazing. And then, like you said, it's amazing that the police, they do it all the time, and they understand the seriousness of their job as officers, and they're just like, yeah, it happens.
Well, the psychology of operating a motor vehicle is so interesting to me, because I know I'm not quite a Zen master, I suppose, outside of my car, but I'm probably a lot more Zen than a lot of people, I guess. Let's put it that way.
I would agree.
I'm definitely a lover, not a fighter. Absolutely do not like confrontation, do not wish to start confrontation. I have got a sharp tongue, and I'll speak my mind if it comes right down to it. And I feel like my verity's getting traipsed on, but at the same time, I'm not going to start shit, as they would say,
Right.
But there is something about being behind the wheel of that 2-ton beast as it's moving down the road at 40 miles an hour or whatever it might be, that just changes me. And I love driving, and I've loved to, as I've said before, I'm a peregrinator. I love to just wander in my car and just drive to wherever, these lonely spots. But when it comes to mingling with others in traffic, I'll admittedly say I'm about as I'm at the nadir of my Zen when I'm in the car. And I try to get on top of it, and I have a hard time. So it's the psychology behind it is fascinating. And to me, I'm the energy guy, so I'm wondering about what's happening to your energy in that situation, Jack. You're getting in this car, and your energy is transforming into from what you really are into this sort of beast. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing, or a werewolf type deal.
I do think that the cars do make you feel stronger than you maybe really are, and I also do think that the other dangerous element is when people get out of their vehicles, and not that they're going to go and confront somebody, but that they're trying to help somebody, maybe on the side of the road, or there's somebody who's stalled in the middle of an intersection. one of the worst things you can do is get out of your vehicle in a situation like that, because once you're out of your vehicle, there's nothing to protect you. And there was a family friend of ours who actually, his son was in his 30s and he died because he was trying to get out of his vehicle and help somebody who had just been in a car accident.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, the roads too. I mean, I remember growing up here and learning about my love for the road and learning about driving. I used to go at night. I mean, I was out all night long on the highways driving. I was nocturnal as, I mean, you wouldn't believe how nocturnal I was. Now I don't see as well at night. So that's kind of out of the question. Plus it's twice as dangerous in some ways to be out there at night with all the inebriated people as it is during the day. But I mean, we have so many highways around here that are close to home that you can't drive them anymore. I remember the days when you could get on them and not see a car for, 8-10 miles. And now they're just so crowded with people and everybody drives so egregiously. And it's funny because it sounds like I've sold my car that I was trying to sell to this woman. Funny story. I'm prone to panic attacks. I have a bit of a type A personality, I've been told. So when I'm out of control of my elements, I have a tendency to kind of lose it a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of them is when other people are driving. I have a hard time with somebody else driving and me in the passenger seat. That's a long-standing thing.
So they wanted to take it for a test drive?
Well, sure. And I insisted on them doing it. She was just like, can I take it for a spin? And I said, well, absolutely. I'd insist on that. But me, I'm thinking about she's this older woman and I'm thinking, well, we'll hop on, a couple of streets, 30, 35 miles an hour. She'll check the wiper fluid out. She'll tune in the radio knobs, things that women car buyers do, not to be completely misogynist. I'm just kidding, of course. But I'm just thinking she's going to check out a few things, make sure it doesn't blow up on her. And
check the air pressure.
I don't know. Yeah, she'll see if she likes the car or not. Oh, totally wrong. She went right for the highway, and man, she drove like a freaking crazy maniac. I mean, gunning at 85 miles an hour. And I looked at her and I said, you want to not do that? And she said, oh, don't worry. It's my ticket, not yours. And I was like, hey.
Yeah, it's my car now. No. It's my car.
You're not understanding. Yeah, it's my
you're
car.
Brave.
Still.
Wow, I never would have done that. I would have said, okay, give me she was with somebody else. Was she with somebody else?
No. Well, yeah, she was. She said she was with her crazy friend. So.
Wow, you have a lot of guts. Holy cow. I would have asked for the crazy friend's ID, and then I would have hung on to that while they were driving.
I should hire you to sell my next car, I guess.
Well, so the last car I sold, it was going to turn into a process. I just knew it because they drove it around a little bit, and then they came back, and they said, okay, well, what we really want to do is we want to take it to Les Schwab.
Mechanic.
And we want to just essentially have them look it over.
Right,
It's a service
which is also
have.
Understandable. Yeah.
And so I ended up sitting at Les Schwab for 45 minutes with these people, telling them my life story. And it was an interesting process, but they ended up buying the car. And selling a car is an interesting deal, isn't it? It's an interesting endeavor. Yes,
but like I said, I'm not going to throw confetti until the money's in my hand and then subsequently in the bank. But it looks like I've gotten it sold. And I think one of the reasons that I managed to get it sold is because I listed it on the new moon. And that's like when you want to start projects or anything you want to finish, you initiate on the new moon.
So tell me about this process.
Well, so this plays into, I think, didn't you say you wanted to chat with me about astrology a little bit?
Yeah, I did. I know that you had mentioned astrological charts. I had never really... I don't know anything about astrological charts. The only thing I know is that the local DJ in my hometown used to read, Aries, today is going to be a 9 out of 10 for you. Better pack your patience. Or,
Aries had better pack their patience every second of every day.
Yeah.
They're the least patient sign of the zodiac. But Cancers, which is what I am, sun sign anyway, that they're supposed to be the most patient sign in the zodiac. I think the interesting thing here, because there's a lot to unpack. I mean, you can get way into this just like you can anything else. And it's unfortunate in my opinion, that the only exposure that so many people have had to astrology is what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It's some kind of, it's kitschy. It's, it's a novelty. It's something that's used. It's like shaking a magic 8-ball, basically. It's nonsense. It's fortune telling from the Zoltar machine. There's nothing to it. But the thing about existence, in this experience anyway, the thing about life, I suppose, for lack of a better term, with a capital L, and not the board game and not the cereal, but the literal thing that we all go through, is that you get acquainted with something if you pay attention enough throughout the course of your life, called serendipity and synchronicity. And those two things are in some ways the same, I feel like, because we tend to say, well, it's a coincidence, it's an amazing, happenstance, or those. To me, there's no such thing. Now, I don't know how that works exactly. I have a couple of different theories. Maybe it's all fated. Maybe it's all literally set, and every single thing plays out the way it's supposed to happen from the beginning, no matter how outlandish it may seem, or no matter what kind of a concatenation may be at hand. It doesn't matter how elaborate it is. That's how it was supposed to play out. Or whether this universe that we live in is random only to the microsecond, that when we make a decision, everything then lines up from there to counter that decision. And so it becomes in some way instantly fated. I don't know how it works. That's not my department. All I know is I'm supposed to be observant of it. And as far as astrology is concerned, I feel like it's unfortunate that it's been relegated to the back page of the newspaper or to
kind of snake oil.
Well, because largely people want to use it, of course, for what? How can I get ahead in life? That's just always the end game. The end game is always, well, when am I going to meet Tall, Dark, and Handsome? When is Tall, Dark, and Handsome going to propose to me? Should I dump Tall, Dark, and Handsome? And trust me, I did charts for free for years for people, and most of them were Starbucks baristas, because I used to go to Starbucks constantly, and that's where I would wind up hanging out, and that's where I'd wind up talking to people, and that's where I'd wind up having people find out that I was interested in astrology. And then, of course, 90% of the women were like, "Oh my gosh, you're into astrology? Can you do my chart?" And it's like, "Of course I can."
So I gotta mention, this is why Jack actually used to have the corner on, what flavor was it?
Chestnut praline?
Chestnut praline. He was the only man, probably west of the Mississippi, with chestnut praline stashed away.
It tastes like liquid Quisp. My favorite cereal of all time, and my favorite cereal box character. Quisp and I are buddies. But if you don't know that one, it's the exact same stuff as Captain Crunch, basically. It's just shaped like little curved discs, little hubcaps that have been warped.
Chestnut praline tastes like something like Captain Crunch?
Yeah, think about like liquid Captain Crunch or liquid Lucky Charms. We used to say it tasted like liquid Lucky Charms too a little bit. But,
okay.
They
don't have it anymore. But
I don't go anymore. So I don't know. I've been off Starbucks
habit.
For years. So
okay.
No, my body said enough, Tiger. You're done. So I can't do it anymore.
But anyway, that's why you probably had to do the charts for the baristas, is because you had to keep your suppliers happy.
Well, it was nice to stay sharp, and it was nice to kind of get into it. And really, of course, more than anything, I wanted to help people. That's what I was wanting to really do. And I was trying to pass along a skill, because this is very self-help. And that's really the way I guess, practice and teach astrology. That's what it is that it's a life skill that you learn from somebody that knows it. So
you asked me for, what was it? Date of birth, time.
Yeah, you only need a few things. You need to know where you were born. You need to know the time that you were born. You need to know, obviously, the day that you were born. And if you have those three things, anybody can run a chart. And in this day and age, it used to be you have to go back through the printed ephemeris and light a few candles and do the hand delineations and then correct the chart by hand. Mom showed me how to do all that. Steve was the master astrologer. Now you just plug it into any number of different free chart programs online, spits it right out. Just in a jiffy, you got it. So obviously, there's no need to go through the ephemeri anymore. You just
there is an algorithm that all of those three things play into.
I wouldn't, not to get overly technical, I don't think it's an algorithm. It's just literally a data bank of information. And so when it takes those pieces of information, it can look up the graph to say this planet was in this many degrees of this sign at that time. Was it something called retrograde? And then it places it within the pie chart, within the 12-space wheel. I think the starting point for this is going back to the Starbucks baristas was just, I stopped doing charts for a while because I got tired of not being able to really effectively assign the right purpose for astrology to them, because they really just looked at it as fortune telling. And again, it was always my boyfriend. Or if they didn't have a boyfriend, it was always, when am I going to get a boyfriend?
I see.
It was always tall, dark, and handsome. When am I going to meet him? I'm dating him now. Should I marry him? Should I wait for him to ask me? Should I dump him? Is he cheating? So it is a tool that is used to get to know oneself, because it is the energetic blueprint that defines your connections to the other major energies that are in this experience. The biggest things that we know about that come close to where we live are what? They're the planets. They're the heavenly bodies. They're the moon. And then there's all of the planets that are after that, including Pluto, which the astronomers may have thrown out and relegated to a hobbit planet or whatever now, but astrology still very much recognizes Pluto. He's an important fellow in all of this because he's the transformative planet. So that's the crux of astrology, the way that I like to not only approach it, but also I like to teach it, is it's really an ancient science. If you want Jack Hansen's astrological viewpoint, if you've never had your chart done, if you're kind of interested in approaching it, looking into it, my recommendation is to approach it like a tool, because that's very much what it is. If you approach it wanting to tell your future and figure out when the next megathrust earthquake is going to happen, you might be able to do that. There is certainly a side of astrology that is predictive, but I quit practicing predictive astrology years ago because I was told by God, source, whatever, came into my ears in my mid-20s and said, hey, kiddo, put this away. It's always going to be a part of your life, but you need to put it away and stop letting it run your life. You just go live your life and let these things do what they're doing. This will circle back and, it'll all kind of come together at some point.
Let the planets take care of themselves, essentially.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's not to say that letting the planets take care of themselves so much. I think it's great to have a connection with the planets. I think it's great to gaze up at the heavens. And, the auroras were just visible over the weekend here in our neck of the woods, something like crazy. And the only thing that drove me nuts about it was how many frickin' people were driving around to try to see it. And I was just like, oh, my God, because I'm sorry, I don't believe that again, it's that split with me. It's that I'm happy that people are taking notice of it, but I'm really unconvinced that they're taking notice of it for what I would consider to be the correct or the right progressive reason.
Yeah. And
they're not really connecting with the heavens. They're just doing what everybody else is doing so they can put a cool picture on social media. And I don't appreciate that.
My daughter and I sat outside for about a half an hour. It was long enough for us to have a conversation, and it was long enough for us to go, wow, how can people wait around and do this? And I'm always amazed at astrology. I think that the universe that we live in is amazing and that we don't give it enough credit. The fact that we're traveling around the sun on this marble together. I know you, Jack Hansen, have opened my eyes to the sense of, we're all in this together. And
whether we like it or not. And I really found myself kind of questioning, how do people have the patience to go out and do this? Now, were the lights location-based? That was one of the questions that I had. Or could you see them everywhere? How does that work? With the night filter on, you were able to see these. And I think that was really kind of the kicker. Now, again, I didn't see these firsthand, but I think most of the astonishing imagery that people may be seeing of the auroras from the contiguous 48 from just recently were all taken with a night filter, or they were touched by a night filter. They were not visible as was shown in the photographs to the naked eye.
Okay, that was my main question, and somebody was like, "Oh, I don't know. I was just sent this photo."
So I understand they can be that vivid, but I think, again, we've got technology that interlaces with everything. So we've got a lot of people using a lot of night vision and all these other things. It doesn't remove from how remarkable the phenomenon is. And it's a very basic phenomenon, really. Particles of radiation from the sun commingle with stuff for, let's get off the scientific because, really, I don't know, but things in the ionosphere, in the upper atmosphere, and that mingling together, that mixing creates a phenomenon that is visual to a degree, sometimes a larger degree than others based on angularities, based on amount of available light, based on light pollution, based on where you're standing, based on azimuth, all that stuff. It gets technical. But, the big thing for me is just going back to the astrology and then kind of linking it together with the astronomy is just, again, we link to intent. What is the intent? Is the intent to make our beautiful and amazing sky that's filled with all those stars, which had been too long since I'd been under too, because I work mornings, so I go to bed early. I don't get to see that shit as often as I should, and I miss stargazing. It's great. Nothing like being skyclad either. I mean, I've had a dream where I'm skyclad. Being skyclad is being naked under the stars, and I've never done that in reality, except when I was a little boy. But I had a dream where I was skyclad one time, and oh my God, I loved it. I mean, I'll never forget that dream. So nothing like it. But again, I question the intent. Are you out there to remember and reconnect with that which is seemingly greater than you, but really is just a part of you? That inextricable man, woman, child, whatever it is, that soul that's out there saying, hey, I'm just literally stretching out my arms and saying, I'm down here and all that's up there, but we're all one and the same. Or are you going up there because it's a Disneyland light show for free? Yeah. And you're trying to keep up with everybody on social media. So again, to me, intent is everything when it comes to these things. And so with astrology, it's the same with astronomy in that sense, is that what is your intent? And I found that too often, at least when I was doing charts years ago for people, the intent was, tell me my fortune. Yeah. Tell me when I'm going to get all these things that I want.
Keyword fortune. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't work that way. The idea is, again, is that this is a great tool for you to be able to know yourself better than you ever thought you could. But I think, Michael, one of the things a lot of people have a hard time with, and this is another one of my little sayings, is the number one person you don't lie to in your life and get away with it is yourself. If you lie to yourself, you have problems. Now, you can lie to it. We've seen it time and time again. You go out in the world right now and see example after example after example of guys and gals living fabulous lifestyles of the rich and famous. I live on the hill, and I've got a great life. I mean, you got this great life in society from being a mendacious bastard. I mean, just lying up a storm as a politician, as a civil servant, as a car dealer, pick your poison, a salesperson. You can lie to a lot of people, to the whole world, and have a great life in this, in this little thing we call a society, in this little, democracy that we're supposed to have. But if you lie to yourself, you've just undone tons and tons. So I just, again, feel like you've got to approach astrology by saying, I'm ready to drop the facade with myself, and I'm ready to learn about myself, and I'm ready to learn about, there's no good or bad. I always, because everybody, I'll say, well, you've got, Scorpio, you've got Mars in Scorpio in the 12th, and it's conjunct Uranus, or, you've got, which that would be pretty deep. So let's go for okay, you have Mars and Scorpio conjunct in, let's say the 9th house, for example, which would be travel and leisure. So people would say, oh, is that good or bad? Well, it has a tendency, that energy, that polarity, the combination of those things has a tendency to say that you could be accident prone, especially while traveling. But is it going to stop you from being a traveler? Of course not. It just means that you need to exercise greater caution than probably the average Joe or Jill does when they're out traveling, because you have this combination of energies. And so the idea is not to spook you from doing it. It's not bad. The idea is to draw your attention to it, to say, hey, this is just something I have to pay a little extra attention to. It's like people that have bad enamel on their teeth. They have to brush a little bit harder than people. Like I said, I believe it's a science. I believe it was one of the first sciences, if not the first science that we ever really knew about, because there is a very visceral energy to it, in my opinion. There is a real energetic connection. And I know a lot of people want to laugh it away and say it's hogwash, it's nonsense. Even the way Jack's putting it sounds interesting, but it's still bullshit. That's fine. I mean, people are more than welcome to have their opinions, obviously. I personally have seen it. There's just too many times that I've seen it be too accurate for it not to have at least a modicum of validity. It needs to be explored. And I think it's an important thing for those who are at least willing to be open-minded and need to have a critical mind about it to explore. People that are too easily taken in, people that are too easily sold on things, I don't know whether it's the best thing for them until they maybe get more of a handle on that. So one of the things I remember, just right off the top of my head, if we're going to start this little journey through the orbs, again, astrologers love to call the planets orbs, or the
every time you say that, you
feel
remind me of the opening of one of my favorite albums of all time, which is the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past.
Oh, yeah.
And he
sure.
says something about
cold-hearted orb that rules the night.
Hearted orb. Yeah.
Yeah, that's from Days of Future Past, and it's Nights in White Satin. It's the end of the song, actually, where that narrative is. It's beautiful. So you have and again, this is all going to sound Greek to those that don't know. So again, but to those that do, I'm sure they're tuned in to say, okay, we're going to vet Jack's astrological knowledge here. So.
Get ready for the emails.
You have Venus in Pisces in the 4th house. So what would that say about you? I mean, Venus is the ruler of a lot of things. Venus is where you find pleasure. Venus is where you derive happiness. Things that make you, Jupiter can do that too, but Venus is where you find peace and solace and things, I would say. Venus is obviously, Venus is the god of beauty and, those types of things. So where we find Venus is where we find some of your fortune. We mostly find Jupiter with your fortune, but we find basically where it is that you like to bask. This is the area of your chart that you like to bask in. And the 4th house is the house of home and family. And in Pisces, it's going to have a spiritual connection. So it would be, and this is kind of unfair because I know you, but it would be one of the things that, as my girlfriend would say, tracks about you, because that placement would tend to suggest that you are very happy at home and that there is a spiritual or religious influence within the home that helps to bind you to the home with wife, children, mother, father, etc. That is a happy place for you. Is that fair enough to suggest?
No, absolutely.
And that's just scratching the surface of Venus in Pisces. I mean, you can go in a lot more depth and detail, but if I were looking at your chart without knowing you, that's what I would say. I would say religious household, probably, or spiritual household growing up. It has a great influence now. It'll continue to have a great influence on your own children. The house is essentially the temple, and it's the temple for not only your family that you share it with, but for you personally. I mean, your home is your temple when you have Pisces 4.
So is that the physical home, or is that like the sense of family?
It's the physical. It's both. It's both, because 4 would be both. 4 would be the physical home, especially the childhood home, and it would be the family. But there's also, not a great debate, but there's also little nuances of the chart and placements of things where astrologers they don't differ, but they have different opinions about where things might have an influence. But where you look at 4, you're looking at home. And for me, anybody with Pisces, even if they're not religious or even if they're not super spiritual, because the house could be vacant, so it wouldn't have that influence, wouldn't have a tug, there could still be what's called the 4th house ruler in that sign. Your house cusp could still be in Pisces on the 4th, so it would still rule that house, and therefore it would still give a great sense of, this is really like my home is my temple. I mean, when I come home, this is a place of rest and, almost worship for me. I mean, my solace is at home. So there's a great, usually, difference. You know how some people let work come home with them? Yeah. Real easy. You know how it's real easy, like people have home offices or things like that. I would doubt that it would probably be too intrusive for a Pisces 4. I would think. Maybe not, but mainly there's going to be a spiritual influence on the home and the home life. So stay away from working from home, maybe. Well, I don't know about that, because you could find solace in something that you did at home for work. So I wouldn't, again, it's not to dissuade or encourage certain activities or behaviors. It's
See,
just
and
to
there
say
I go.
that
I'm looking into the kind of the fortune telling side of it.
it's just to say that that's your connection. It's just to say that the energy that's connected to the side of Michael that has to do with his home really kind of says this about it. It's polarized with wherever you find Pisces, you also find a lot of intuitive energy. So I would say that you are far more prone. Neptune we'd look at too. Where's Neptune? I got to remember here. Let me look at my phone real quick where your Neptune is. Your Neptune is in the second house. So, I would say anybody with Neptune 2 is probably going to also be pretty intuitive with money and with their belongings. You'll have a really good sense of probably when to buy low and sell high if you want to. And with Pisces 4, because Neptune's the natural ruler of Pisces, or Pisces the natural ruler of Neptune, I should say, it would be the same. You'd also have an intuition that surrounds the home. You're probably going to be better stock trading in the basement than you are on Wall Street, the floor of Wall Street. Let's put it that way. And by the way, I hate Wall Street, and I would never stock trade, but that's just one way to put it.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a really, it's fascinating to me. I'm fascinated because I'm fascinated in what I am. And that's not to say that an ego isn't probably a part of that. I'm sure that any psychologist would not disagree, but I really am fascinated with the stuff that I'm made of. What is this? What is this experience? Who is this Jack Hansen that I've decided to be, or that for whatever reason I have become in this particular experience? And what it is, looking for clues that define you are hard, honestly, I think, in this day and age. They're difficult because so often we tend to reach out for things that are not really, I would say that they're illusory. Quite honestly, I would say that the things that I look out to connect with is a social group, is a television show, is a podcast, for example. And it's not that you can't really connect with those things, but you don't connect with the kind of car that you drive. That isn't really finding out who you are. What my preference in Totino's pizza rolls is: do I like pepperoni or sausage? That's a preference. That doesn't really say a lot about who you are. So really cutting through all of those, things that aren't as important and getting into the heart of who are you and what is your connection to that which is seemingly greater that's moving around out there in the heavens and having an influence on you, because those orbs are large. Let's face it, Saturn and Jupiter, for example, because they're the largest bodies in the solar system, those are large bodies of energy. And so when they move, they influence you. And that's the idea, is that Jupiter isn't just big because it gets to sit there and be big and be a gas giant. The energy that comprises it is enormous. And so therefore, when it swings around the sun and comes into certain proximities to the Earth, or anytime really, it has an effect on you, like looking at Saturn through that telescope that I told you about.
Yeah.
That's what that said to me, is, hey, kiddo, that little, marble
the
that
star
sits
of
there
the
with
show
the rings
right
around
there.
it,
Yeah.
that has an influence on you because it's big. It may look small in your viewfinder, but it's big. And when it swings around and moves and does its thing, it has an influence on you. And Saturn, by the way, is your lesson planet, typically is what they call it. They call it the planet that's steeped up with your lesson or your karma.
Before we get into Jupiter and Saturn, I do want to ask you, circling back to Totino's pizza rolls.
Yeah.
Don't you hate how those burn the mouth or the roof of your mouth?
Oh, yeah. That pizza burn is terrible. They should just call those pizza burn.
Those are bad for that, too. I have found that I'm always, usually when I reach for the pizza rolls, I'm super hungry. And so after sitting for 5 minutes in the microwave, those little things are just boiling pockets of death. And you throw those in your mouth, and that is a roof mouth burn if I ever did see one. Pizza rolls, I love them, though.
I'm fearing that we're going to lose the account from Geno's right off the bat, but you shouldn't be eating pizza rolls anyway. They're terrible for you. They're filled with nothing. It's like the guy that they were going to execute, and they said, "What do you want your last meal to be?" And he said, "Have a couple of Hot Pockets," and he died anyway right before they saved the the electricity that night. They didn't have to fry him because he just died from eating the Hot Pockets instead.
That's terrible. You said something about Jupiter in my chart.
So you have Jupiter second like I do, and that's a great placement. I mean, wherever you find Jupiter is where you find your fortune. It's where you find, not by fortune, I mean your literal fortune. Your luck is basically where you find Jupiter. And so to have it in your second house, where I have it, you have it in Capricorn, I have it one down the road in Aquarius. I remember I've had several astrologers that I've talked with over the years look at my chart and say, well, you have Jupiter second, you'll never not have money, because Jupiter is the house of money and possessions. But more importantly, and this is the one that's often skipped over in my opinion, it's about how we bring those things to ourselves. We have houses that define our daily job and our career, which would be 6 and 10. But, that second house can't be overlooked. It's not just stuff. It's not just your material possessions and money, which is what everybody wants to make it. It's also about the energy that's wrapped up in how those things come to you. And so Jupiter Capricorn, my guess is that your possessions are going to be, well, the interesting thing is that you have Sagittarius ruling that ascendant you have Sagittarius ruling the house cusp there. And then, so the Capricorn planets play behind the scenes. So it's not entirely fair to say that your possessions are probably a mix of highly practical and, with Uranus sitting there in Sag, very sort of different. And electronics. It's eclectic. Again, this is almost unfair because I know you. Eclectic would be me because I have Aquarius too.
Yeah.
With the Uranus there, especially, that's got to be where your love for electronica comes from, because you love electronics, and so I would probably have said that to you anyway.
Well, and when you say house, when you say that Saturn or Jupiter is in the second house, what does that mean?
So remember, we have our pie chart. We have to visualize it because for the purposes of podcasting. So it's a pie with 12 slices, and those 12 slices, if they're, and no one has this, I've never seen it before anyway, but those houses, those slices of pie are divided up into 12 slices that, if they were all perfectly equal, which they never are because of the way charts work out, they would be 30 degrees wide. They'd go from 0 to 29 degrees. That's how large each slice is.
Throughout the year, they're flexing back and forth.
Your natal chart doesn't do that. It's static. It's set. But the orbs themselves
come in
that are up there, they transit.
Okay, so you've got these orbs that are circling the pie, and Jupiter might be in the second pie for this person. It might be in the fourth pie for this person. It's just kind of like going around and around. Okay, I got it.
You got it. And as far as how the planets move or the orbs move, Mercury is a real fast mover, so it could be very easy. Let me glance at my phone and see where your Mercury is real quick. So your Mercury is in Taurus. It's in 3 degrees, and it's in your 6th house. So when you were born, on the day that you were born, at the time that you were born, Mercury was in 3 degrees of Taurus. By the next morning, it probably had easily skirted into 4 or 5 degrees because it moved quick. So your 3 degrees is set in stone. It's emblazoned in your chart. It doesn't change, but Mercury, of course, keeps moving around the sun. And as it does, from one cycle to the next, it moves from one sign to the next through that phase, and therefore it impacts or transits different parts of your chart. So again, we're kind of picking from, different parts of this is not a full, presentation or anything, but a lot of times people are big into Saturn returns. Saturn takes about anywhere between 26 and 30 years to make a complete swing around all 12 signs of the zodiac. Really? So, and because it's your lesson planet, Saturn, it's said very often, will come around to check on you. So when you turned somewhere between 26 and 30, for most people, it's right around 27, 28. Saturn will come back to roost right where it is in your natal chart, and when it does, the idea is that it checks on how you're doing with that life lesson. It wants to see, all right, where are you at with this? What's Michael doing with this? What's Jack doing with this? And then you'll have a second Saturn return should you live long enough, sometime between 56 and 60, just the same, right in that area, right in that zone. Maybe it's a little earlier, 54 to 58, something like that. I'm not quite there yet. I'm almost there, though. I'll have my second Saturn return soon. So all of the planets will swing back around again, typically to the sign that they were in when you were born, except for the real slow movers. Pluto conjunct, for example, will not happen in a lifetime. Neptune conjunct will not happen in a lifetime, not unless maybe you were very, very old. I think you'd have to be on order of in the 100 and teens.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think for Neptune, you'd have a Neptune return.
To come back into that.
I think it's not impossible. Man, you'd have to be old for that. You have to be one of the world's oldest living people probably to have a Neptune return.
So now when you say return, then it's Saturn is returning every 30, did you say 36 or 26?
Every 26 to 30 years or so, it'll make its way around.
So that is every 26 to 30 years, it is in the same phase, same placement as when I was born.
Yep. So your Saturn is right on your ascendant, first house in Scorpio, 15 degrees. So sometime here about, 13, 14 years ago, it was right back there again, coming to check on you.
Interesting. And so now
Saturn 1, just for what it's worth here, Saturn 1, especially near the ascendant like it is with you, really interesting placement for Saturn, because the first house is you. The first house is the face and the persona that you have decided to show the world. So that sun sign that you are is the Michael Elliott that only people that know him real well probably get to see. Sun signs are very difficult to guess. Most people, when they guess, will see a person's rising sign because it makes up the physical body and it also makes up the persona. It makes up how a person behaves. I have Sagittarius rising, big surprise. If anybody knows astrology, they're, laughing their ass off right now because they're like, yeah, we couldn't tell, Mr. Tall and jokey Smurf, so Sag rising is usually early degrees like I have too, is either very tall, and I'm about 6'2", 6'3", so usually quite tall and very gregarious. Late signs actually can be very short, like a Shetland pony, believe it or not, I've discovered too. But so with a Scorpio first house, it's going to define your physical makeup. But then with that Saturn sitting there, your lesson is literally that persona. Who do you want to show to the world is what it is that you have to work on in this experience, in this lifetime. So, and one of the things I've discovered too about Saturn is that I perceived it, in my opinion, incorrectly for the longest time, because Saturn is very often seen by astrologers as, well, it's your life's lesson. So once you master that lesson, you're off the hook. I don't think it works that way. In fact, I've become convinced that it doesn't work that way. So if you're working with Saturn in your chart and you're frustrated because you're saying, this is my lesson and I just want to get through it. And, because it's Capricorn. So a lot of people don't like Saturn because they don't want to learn lessons. They want to go have fun. And, I don't think you ever stop learning lessons. If you master one lesson Saturn you in your chart, it will send you another. And if you get past that one successfully, it will send you another that will be in the same vein. You'll just peel, again, another layer of that proverbial universal onion back. I don't think you're never finished learning lessons where Saturn is in your chart. It's not, to me, it's not pass this exam and then you're good when you move on.
Yeah.
It's literally just an exercise in learning. And that's how you have to look at it. Instead of, what is a lesson? It's learning. And so why make it a hard lesson? My Saturn is in the 7th house, and that's your house of relationships, especially marriage.
So now the later the house, does that play a part in whether it's strong or whether it's weak, or does it matter?
By later the house, I know we're not looking at the chart, but you might have a general idea of what's going on. By later the house, what Do you mean like the further into the house it is?
Well, yeah, you said 7th house.
Yeah, so let's go back to your chart because there is something called the ascendant, and the ascendant is the line. So draw a cross, a plus sign, if you will, that divides now that set of 12 slices of pie into 4 clusters of 3. That first cluster that's going to be on the southwestern edge, if you're just looking at it, it would actually be the reverse if we look at it in astrological terms. But in this instance, it's okay. We can just look at it like we would in geometry. That one that's down in between 6 and 9 o'clock, for example, if we're doing it that way, that's your first, second, and third houses. So that first line that's drawn, that horizontal line, that is your ascendant that's there in your first house. And so the closer any orbs are to that ascendant line, yes, it will have a more pronounced impact typically on the native, on their behavior, and on that, again, first house, that outward persona and that visual persona.
Okay.
So I have Neptune sitting right there, 1 degree off of my ascendant, and Neptune on the first is highly charismatic. So it's what allows me to go on these enormous diatribes about things whenever I want to. It's that great orator. Neptune ascendant is very big for that, but it's retrograde, so it means that I second guess it very often too, which I absolutely do.
So
and we
that
can't
can
get
be
into retrograde.
That's going to be too long. But I guess what I was saying is so then each planet kind of has a role that it plays.
Oh, yes.
In the chart. And so like you had said before, Saturn is let's just go through this real quick because I know we're getting very close to the amount of time that we need. But we have Saturn, that is the
Okay, you just want to go through the orbs. Mercury is let's just walk them out from the sun. The sun is you. The sun, I mean, there's no other way to put it. The sun is the core of you. It's the furnace. Think of it as the furnace that provides the light and the warmth for all the planets, even the ones that are very distant can at least see the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same for you. The sun is the furnace that burns in the core that makes you. That is the energy that defines you. So the polarity of that energy is really, it's you. So you're an Aries sun. So at the end of the day, Michael is always going to circle back to whatever the moniker for his sun sign is. And the moniker for his sun sign is I am. So you are going to circle back to self. That's how you're going to define all of your problems at the end of the day. When you get into the biggest of life's dilemmas or whatever it may be, you will circle back to that sun energy and say, I am. So everything will revolve around Michael.
And that has to do with the positioning of the sun when I was born.
Yes.
Okay.
The sun was in Aries when you were born, and you have a 5th house sun. So it's over in your house of, it's the 5th house is, I can't say I don't like the 5th house. That's not fair. It's just, it's a more difficult one to read because it's Leo energy by definition. So it's travel and leisure and it's pleasurable pursuits. And so with your sun there, that's going to be a pronounced part of your life. And in Aries, there could be a lot of sporadic things. You could go on trips really suddenly. You could probably actually, let me put it this way. You probably might go outside your door one day and say, just all of a sudden, I'm going to climb that mountain, and you're going to go do it. That weekend. You'll do it that day. That's what an Aries 5 sun to me would kind of just say if we were not looking at it super in depth. Just that kind of thing. Lots of energy there too.
Interesting.
So then walking it out real quickly, Mercury is communication. Venus, as we talked about already, is sort of, again, it's where your beauty and part of your fortune is, although that's really more Jupiter, but it's where you find your peace. It's where you find your solace. So Venus is also love, not sex. That's Mars, but it's love, and it's how you express feelings of love and gratitude for things. And Venus it's your happy place, really, more than anything. It's where you can kind of go, oh boy, okay, I've got a ding dong and my favorite shows on TV, and I'm cuddled up in blankets, and this is my happy place. And so where you find that is it's your Calgon Take Me Away, if anybody remembers that planet. Mars is action, and it's also sex. But really it's so often defined as sex because we so often are so pursuant of that, and that's fine. It's part of the human experience, but it's Mars is your action planet. I mean, wherever you see Mars is really where it's moving through a transit in your chart is where you're going to have a lot of things happening, typically. And I had an old astrologer friend of mine named Roy. He's a great guy, Capricorn to the core, driest wit ever, loved it. He was the one that kind of taught me that. And so I have a great appreciation for my understanding of Mars because of old Roy. Jupiter, as we talked about, is your fortune. Saturn is your lesson. Uranus is really all about sudden, unexpected change. It also rules a lot of really cool things. It's where you're going to find like the whole generation. Like I'm a huge Uriah Heep fan, and prog rock, the Mellotron and all that. Anybody, that's a generational planet because it moves so slow. So there's a whole generation of kids with Uranus in a particular sign. And so when it was in the sign of Libra, the whole bunch of us kids, we all loved music that was spacey and filled with electronic keyboards and digital music and that sort of thing. And by digital music, I mean keyboards and synthesizers. And that's really when that kind of rose to its heyday in the 70s, actually, is when a lot of those kids were born. So it's kind of interesting.
And so how does that play into mine?
Well, you have Uranus 2. So with Uranus 2, it's interesting because, you have 3 orbs in the second. And that's quite a few. It's not a true stellium, what they would call, which would be 3 planets in the same sign in the same house, because you have 1 in Sagittarius, that's your Uranus, and the other 2 are in Capricorn. But Uranus in the second can often produce a lot of you have Jupiter there, though, so it's interesting because with Jupiter there, like I said, it's so fortuitous as far as money is concerned. Even if you're kind of haphazard with money, which I sort of have been throughout my life, it's just like, it always circles back because Jupiter's just easy come, easy go. So it's just like, I blew my money on all this licorice. I'll get more money next week. And sure enough, you do somehow. I mean, it's just it's kind of unfair to have Jupiter second as far as the rest of the zodiac looks at it. But with Uranus there, it can produce sudden, unexpected changes with money and with possessions. So, what could that be? Could be anything from sudden gains. I would say, especially with Jupiter sitting there, it could be sudden gains of financial wealth. It could be sudden gains of property and by property, I mean stuff. I mean, like somebody could give you their record collection or you'll get, it's not inheritance so much, but just you have fortuitous acquisitions. I mean, you're going to find great deals on things. You're going to you could be the guy that uncovers the copy of the Constitution behind the oil painting you bought for $5 at the yard sale. I mean, those are the kind of things I think we're talking about with that. But Uranus, you also have to be careful because there can be sudden departures of money as well. There can be a lot of spending with Sag Uranus potentially. Like I spent a lot of money on this thing that I didn't really need to. But see, then you have those Capricorn planets there, so it almost counterbalances that.
Interesting. And so when somebody says that they're balanced, that might actually have something to do with it.
It could. We have to look at the chart more intensely, and I kind of have to have a chance to sort of let it speak to me more, because that's also how I read charts as an intuitive chart reader, is I sort of glare at it for 5 or 10 minutes and just whisk my hands around the wheel a few times and go, okay, what's going to jump out at me here? And what's the most important thing here? So,
wow, you've covered a lot of ground already. That really is kind of over my head. I had no idea that it was this intense.
Yeah. Let me finish the orbs real quick, though. So Neptune would be next. That's where you're going to find your faith. So Neptune is all about your beliefs in things that are spiritual. So Neptune is all about spirituality. It also is about occult subjects. And again, don't be freaked when I say occult. Occult is an ancient word. It goes back. It just means hidden or secret. It just means things that we don't see. So that would be the things that lie beyond the doors. It's like Stranger Things, the Upside Down. That's Neptune.
So where does it play on my chart?
Those kids have a lot of heavy Neptune influence in their charts, I think, to be visiting the Upside Down as much as they are. Your Neptune is in the second house again, so which is kind of interesting to note, because in Capricorn, Neptune's not really at home in Capricorn because it's an earth sign, Capricorn is, and Neptune is happier when it's free to flow in those waters of its native Pisces, or at least maybe have some air to conduct with. But I would say about anybody Neptune second, again, you'll have great intuition about your purchases. or about your finances, because it's going to impart you with that. It could also, although it's in Capricorn, so, I would say anybody with Neptune second is also going to be very sentimental about their possessions. But those possessions, like, I believe my girlfriend has Neptune second. Yeah, and she's very sentimental about her possessions. She saves everything and things but hers is in a different sign than yours is. Hers is in Aquarius. Yours is in Capricorn. So being in Capricorn, I would guess that the thing that you would be sentimental about would be like that woodworking plane or that rake that you've had for 14 years that works so great that you can't possibly give it up. I'll never be able to get another rake like this. Nothing rakes. They don't make them like this anymore. So did I hit on something?
If my wife heard this right now, she'd be like, yeah, see, you're a hoarder. You're a hoarder.
Yeah, I hit on
say,
something.
you know what the
there.
difference between collectors and hoarders are? Collectors know what things are worth.
And they're organized, too. And finally, Pluto, and I remember saying this way back at the beginning of today's chat, that astronomers may have thrown Pluto to the dwarves, but astrologers definitely have not. Pluto is a huge planet, possibly one of the biggest, even though it is the smallest, and it's the slowest to move around the sun, and it has that erratic orbit as well, because it's all about Scorpio energy, and that's all about transformation. Pluto is also very equatable with sex and war and things that are a little bit more dark and secretive. But at the end of the day, Pluto is about transformation. And whereas with Saturn will ask you to change. Saturn will say, hey, you need to learn this. So why don't you change? And you can go, no, I don't want to change. And Saturn says, all right, fine, I'll leave you alone and you can suffer with the consequences and it'll come back to check on you in 27 years. But Pluto is taking it one way or the other. Pluto is tearing everything all the way down to the bare slab so it can be rebuilt again. I went through a first house Pluto transformation when I was young, and my mother just loved it because she knew it was happening. And as it got underway, I went from being the kid with the put a bowl over his head, haircut, and the thick Coke bottle, Ryan Duran glasses, not that anybody remembers who he is, and the sweatpants to school, and just, the real dorky kid that was picked on constantly. And in between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, the transformation was so epic that when I went back to school the next year, kids who I'd gone to school with since kindergarten did not know who I was.
Interesting.
So that first house Pluto transit, Pluto came through my first house and said, you are changing your physical appearance. And it was heavy. But it takes a long time to go through a house. And so when that was going to happen, anybody's guess, I suppose. And it's been trucking through. I have a wide second house, and it's been trucking through my second house now for years. And so it's teaching me all these great lessons about my material possessions and my money, because it's trying to take all of this stuff that I have been busy accruing for so long and getting me to see that it has less and less and less value all the time, so there can be a bare slab to build something brand new there that I'll really, really be excited about before I'm dead and I'm finished with this experience and can go on to the next one. So
fascinating.
Love Pluto energy.
So
Pluto
the houses can be
energy.
different sizes for different people then?
Yes, they can.
Wow.
And they always, like I said, they always are. You can have something called an interception in chart where it makes it'll make two of your houses. They'll be on opposing sides of the chart. So for example, because I have a wide second, go across the chart to the eighth. The eighth is also just as wide. So they'll always be corresponding to the other side. But that also makes for a very thin, I'm forgetting which house it is. I want to say 11th.
It's taking away from something else.
Yeah. So the 11th and it'd be the 6th then, therefore, or the 5th, excuse me. They're thinner slices. I'm not looking at my chart, so.
Oh, that's very fascinating. But you have found, in your experience and your learning of this science, that it is something that definitely plays true in, would you say, your daily, or would you say that it's kind of like there's just different seasons?
I would say most importantly, it's taught me about who I am. And it's taught me acceptance. It's taught me this is how you're wired, Jack. I mean, this is where you came in, and this is where everything was at when you came in, and this is how you are wired. Think of it like a baby lying on its back with a planet, a mobile of the planets spinning around up above them, and they're grabbing for them and reaching them. That baby has a real energetic attachment to the real planets that are encircling them in the heavens. And so it may not resonate with everybody, but to me, there's just something about thinking about it like that and realizing that, again, when Jupiter moves or when Saturn moves or when any of those things move, those are heavy. Those are energy, and they affect you. And so where you came out and when, that's how your car is wired. That's how your personality is wired. That's how your physical being is wired. That's how you're wired to be here. And so therefore it's incredibly important, because someone has just handed you a blueprint to your car and said, here's what you're driving. Now, of course, we all probably want a Ferrari. You know, everybody wants a Bugatti or a Lambo or one of these stupid hypercars that cost $1 trillion and is just a waste of time, if you ask me. But, you know, everybody's going to want a fancy car. But we don't all get fancy cars. So the first thing that it teaches you is acceptance. But it also teaches you that where my car may not be a race car and it may not be as pretty as the one that's parked next to me in English class or at work when I'm, you know, sitting there at the bank or whatever, you know, your job is. In some ways, every single vehicle has its strengths. So every single vehicle will have its strong points and every single vehicle will have its weak points. But the beautiful thing is that with a garage full of cars, wherever you might be, there's the opportunity for everybody to enjoy each other's rides, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, again, where you're deficient potentially or theoretically, another person is going to be more strong, and you're going to be able to be rewarded for that if they're your friend, if you can reach across the zodiac, reach across the stars, the heavens, and shake hands with them, just like they're going to get, you know, it's the old, if you'll be my bodyguard kind of thing. You know, the lummox who protects the egghead, who can, and then the next thing you know, they're best friends, because the one obvious part of each that's so pronounced or not pronounced about their character becomes unified. So it becomes the strength when they're together, when they're in unison.
So you have given me so much of this blueprint that I now want to go off the podcast and actually do some more learning about that. So if you were to pick one planet that is extremely influential or just something, what would you say is the most influential in my chart? Well, Jack, I think that's going to be all the time that we have today. And
I hope I didn't bore everybody to death with the astrology talk.
No, I think it's very fascinating. And this music that we're hearing, this is Holt's The Planets, one of my favorite classical pieces. And we are hearing the movement Saturn, the bringer of old age.
Ah, yes.
To sing us out. Well, it's been a pleasure as always, my friend.
Same here, and we'll do it again.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own existence brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.